Just to start officially, hello and welcome. My name is Josiane. My pronouns are she, her, and I'll be your host today. I am thrilled to be introducing our designers. Today, we're lucky to have with us Michelle Porter from Fundle Patterns, Kathleen Sperling, Liv from Neuro Stitches, and Angie from Knitwegian. So I will ask you all to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your design business and how you got started. Maybe we can start with Michelle.
Hi. Okay. My name is Michelle Porter, and my self-published pattern collection is called Fondle Patterns. I've been in the yarn industry for about 35 years. I've worked in yarn stores where I've served customers and taught lessons, and I owned a yarn store in Toronto for it was about 25 years ago. I worked for various yarn distributors in their warehouses, picking orders, and also doing some design work all at the same time. So warehouse work. I've been part of the design teams for some major yarn labels, like Marisol and Diamond Yarns of Canada, Estelle's House brand yarns, Zen Yarn Garden. I did a bunch for them, and I do occasionally Ancient Arts fiber. So I have some good clients. I started freelance pattern design in 2006. So I've been at it for a while. In Ravelry, I actually have 283 patterns to my name, but I've done more than that because I was doing it before Ravelry existed, and they have to be added in, and I didn't add in old ones. So it's kind of a lot. I've had to discontinue a few, and it's always revolving that way. I've been published in Vogue Knitting and Knit Simple, Noro Accessories book, a couple times on Knitty.com. And I'm going to say my slogan is touch the yarn and feel inspired. So that's kind of where I got the Fondle Patterns name. It's all about the touching and the feeling and the seeing what the yarn is like. And I like to work with natural fibers and luxury fibers especially.
Awesome. I thank you. I think that's a good place to conclude, touch the yarn, get inspired, find a pattern, and just have fun with it. So I'll ask maybe Angie now to introduce herself.
Okay, so I'm Angie from Knitwegian, and I actually live in Australia. So at the moment, as you can see, it's really hot. It's almost, I don't know what the Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion is, but we're having a heat wave at the moment. So it makes it a bit tricky this time of year to be knitting, but not a day goes by without knitting. So I'm a very new designer actually. I've only got two, I say, that I've shared with this knit along, this yarn along that's going on at the moment. But I've had a few that I started with that I need to sort of update, and I have a lot more that I've started on that I just need to get to the next stage. And yeah, I suppose I was ready to start designing, and I got into it, and I found knitting just filled this amazing space in my life, and just even meeting other knitters online just really inspired me. And I was going through a bit of a tricky time in my life, and knitting was I was growing and just learning so much and meeting amazing people. And I thought that name Knitwegian comes from, if I was in a land filled with knitters, if we were a community of knitters, that community really has inspired me wanting to design. And so I felt, as a citizen of a country of crafters, I would be a Knitwegian. So it's just a bit quirky and a bit random, but yeah, I felt like that made me feel that was my identifying citizenship. Yeah, and so I've just started. I started designing, and then things happened in life. There was a few bumps, and we had to make a few moves and things. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing growing. But I'm looking forward to learning from the other designers on this panel as well today.
Awesome. And thank you for sharing the origin of your designer name, because I was kind of curious about that, you know, wondering whether you had Norwegian roots or something. So yeah, that's very interesting. So imagining a country of knitters, that's pretty cool. Maybe we could go with Liv now to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Liv. It's short for Olivia, of Neuro Stitches. So Neuro Stitches is both what I publish my patterns under, but also it's an online community that I created. It's like a peer support community for neurodivergent folks, connecting them through fiber arts. We focus on knitting and crochet, but we welcome fiber artists of all practices. I've been crocheting since I was 8 years old. I've always kind of been like designing my own patterns. But it's a scary leap to go into publishing your pattern. So I am a very new designer. I only have like one actually published, tech edited, tested a pattern out there right now. I've got a few more in the works, that I'm really excited about. I'm kind of going through a bit of a career transition right now. I was a tax attorney, um, and I'm autistic ADHD, so that's where I got started with Neuro Stitches, and so that's the name. Neuro Stitches where it came from. So I'm transitioning into a career away from law and focusing on crochet pattern design and running our Neuro Stitches online community that is hosted through Discord. So
that sounds awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Even though, you know, it's all very new for you, it's always interesting. I love the mix of experience we have today. So that should be very interesting. And last but not least, we do have our very own dear Kathleen. Take it away. You'll have to unmute.
I unmuted because I was a good little girl and I muted myself when you said to mute myself. So hello, I am Kathleen. My pronouns are she, her. And I started knitting when I was a kid, sort of doing it on and off since about the age of 7 or 8. So that's, yeah, that's quite some time ago. That's over 40 years. And then I got really into it in adulthood. And really fell down the rabbit hole because I had started in the workforce, and suddenly these coworkers of mine were having babies and stuff. And I thought, ooh, I could be the person at the office who does the knitted gifts for the new babies. And wouldn't that be cool? And that is exactly what I'm doing even to this day. And then after doing that for probably, I guess, about a decade or so, maybe less, I realized, there's no real reason why I can't just make my own patterns. I was sort of looking at the instructions that I was following, and I was like, I could put something together, and I could write instructions and follow this sort of, this style and this nomenclature. And so I did. So I think I started around 2002. And it was pretty much baby blankets. I did 2 baby blankets for my my sister-in-law was pregnant, and so I was making gifts. And then I kept going and going and going. And then Ravelry came along, and the idea of like selling, self-publishing. So most of my stuff is self-published, but I've also been in a number of magazines over the years, print and online. The designing took a big leap in 2012 because there was sort of across the 12 and 12 challenge thing. And the idea was that you should choose 12 things that would be a challenge for you to do in 2012. And people were like, I sort of thought, well, for me, because I'm a very fast knitter, a good challenge for me would be 12 adult sweaters in a year. And then I thought, yeah, but I don't actually want to make 12 sweaters in a year. And so this won't be any fun at all. So I thought, well, what could I do 12 of that would still be a challenge? And I thought, well, what if I came up with 12 design proposals for magazines and submitted those? And so that is what I did. And I had a really good acceptance rate. And so 2013 was very busy because I didn't sort of like think this through. Like if you submit 12 things and then a lot of them get accepted, that means you're going to be doing a lot of work. But it was really great for me as a designer to sort of like work with other people in the industry and really get the hang of how things work. And so, yeah, I've been on and off designing for magazines and yarn companies and things like that ever since, but most of it is self-publishing. And that's me.
Awesome. That so much sounds like you, being up for a challenge and
I can do that.
making it exactly, taking it a notch up.
Yep.
That's so awesome. And actually, we'll go with our the questions that have been submitted by participants to the Fasten Off Yarnalong. And the first one being, how do you begin a new design? And I might ask Kathleen to keep going with that.
So I have no consistent process whatsoever. If people are sort of looking for designers of like, oh, do these designers have like a consistent process and they always start the same way and they always take the same kind of notes and they follow the same sort of nice path from A to B to get to a design? I do not at all. But what I've been sort of finding is that my process really depends on what kind of design idea it is. So if the design idea is really mostly based on, well, I want to make something that is a very particular shape, I will start with a sketch. And then I will be like, okay, well, how's the shaping going to go in order to get that shape that's in the sketch? So I did a sketch for, I have a pair of socks where you start from the center of the heel and you work out like a hat, like a top-down hat. And so that got a sketch. That was the very first thing. And I was like, okay, so if I do and then I come up with instructions from there. Or if what I'm actually trying to do is to take a motif that I'm seeing in real life and turn it into some kind of knitting version with color or texture, both, I will do a chart first. And then, if the design idea comes from the yarn itself, like I find myself like, ooh, this yarn and this yarn would go well together, and I want to make something, then there's an entirely different process where I just sort of noodle about it in my head and like, well, what could I do with these two things? And then lots of research and looking for like visual ideas, what I could put together. So there's no consistency, but typically after that, I will write myself a set of initial instructions, and then, grab some yarn and get going. And then there will be a lot of realization and revision and reknitting after frogging. And sometimes there's a lot more of that with some patterns than others. And then that whole process forms the basis for the final pattern instructions. So that's, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And how about you, Liv? How do you begin a new design? What does it start with?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've heard from a lot of designers that they do a lot of sketches. Like they'll draw it out and everything. And for me, I've never actually done that before. I usually start off with I'll get an idea in my head and then I'll actually work with the yarn and make like a mini version of what I've got in my head, and it's just a matter of like starting over and actually like making it and stuff. So there's a lot of frogging and stuff, and I always use what I call like my practice yarn. So I'll get like some cheaper yarn to work on a design with, And then I wait and I save the good yarn for when I'm ready to make the actual finished thing. But usually how I do it is I make it, I try it out, and if I like something, I have a notepad next to me and I write down the word instructions. So but I've always found that really interesting that other designers, they a lot of them do that. They draw pictures and sketch it out. And it's funny because that's just never occurred to me. It's interesting how our brains just work differently that way.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So many ways for designers to approach that same problem. And
Yeah,
yeah, so
absolutely.
much fun. How about you, Michelle? Um,
Oh, there, finally
you're back.
paused and froze. I go, oh. How do I start? I start with the yarn. It has to be a yarn that I love. And I make many, many, many swatches. All kinds of different stitches, sizes, different needle sizes. I have to know the behavior of the yarn. And I wash swatches and see how they come out after so I can get some really good idea what to expect. And often they're quite large swatches. I can spend just days and days swatching. And then you can learn sort of if the yarn is going to be soft and drapey or stiff and rustic, or if it's spongy, if it's got good stitch definition, is it good for cables or better for lace, that kind of thing. And depending on how much yarn I have, whether I'm going to make accessories or sweaters, because I make a lot of sweaters, I sketch out the ideas, or I look through my sketchbook for sketches I already have. I don't work on the computer. I don't use spreadsheets. I'm totally a sketchbook and a calculator person. So I'll draw a schematic in my sketchbook and I'll fill out all the math, and then I'll grade it as I design it for all the sizes all the same time. So if there's 9 sizes, I work out all the math and just write it in, like stitch count at the bottom, how many rows, stitch count for the armholes, just everything is there from top to bottom. So I can know if it's all going to work as a whole design instead of trying to grade it afterwards, because that's really a problem I find, because it might work really good for some of the sizes and then there's a real muddle where it doesn't quite work out mathematically. So after I've done this schematic, then I'll just knit from that a whole garment, usually for myself, so I can judge after if it's got any boo-boos or something really crooked or wrong on it, because I can put it on and try it on. Then I usually write it out in words, like it would be a pattern that you could read. And then after that, I will knit from that a real sample in a different size. And that's my real prototype, or my what I'm going to use for photos, with good everything just the way I'd want it. And at that point, I made a lot of corrections usually. Then it goes to the editor and then the test knitters. So they usually get almost a finished product by the time the editors and the test knitters get it. And I've usually already done at least 2 samples, my prototype for me and the one that I think is the good one. And then sometimes the test knitters will surprise me with a question or something that didn't work out, and I have to go and revise that. But usually that's the way it goes: yarn, sketches, prototype, editor.
Cool.
If that's the right answer, I don't know.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's very interesting. That some designers will noodle ideas, by swatching, and others are yeah, it's always so interesting to see how completely different it can be for everyone. And how about you, Angie? What is your process like? How do you begin a new design?
Yeah, I think often it comes to my mind when I'm falling asleep or when I can't sleep at 2 or 3 in the morning, and suddenly my brain's really creative and I'm just getting some great ideas. And I feel like somewhere along the line, I feel like I'm a little bit of a collector of, we all collect yarn and we all collect patterns, but I also think as a designer, you collect stitch patterns you like, and you know, when you're out and about, when you're on holiday, when you're traveling, you take in different motifs, different sites that sort of inspire you. So I feel like for me, somewhere along the line, it comes into a stitch pattern. And if I see a stitch pattern that I might inspire an idea, then I'll swatch it out and I'll play with it a bit. And then I mean, especially because I'm only starting, I'm keeping my projects or my patterns to really simple items that don't have a lot of shaping or a lot of size. So things like cowls, I've designed a cuff, which was probably my first pattern. Yeah, and it was a stitch pattern that really motivated the end result. And then even I had the privilege of being able to design a shawl for my cousin who got married. She wanted one for her wedding, and she's a really interesting person, and she wanted me to go for colour. And I wanted to put a bit of her in that design and a bit of her husband in that design. So I looked for stitch patterns that I felt resembled certain aspects about them or their journey or their future journey together. So yeah, I feel like stitch patterns are the beginning for me.
Awesome. Our next question, I'll have to adjust it a little bit for some of you, because people wanted to know what was your hardest pattern to design and why. And I'm gonna start with Liv. You've got one published pattern. Maybe what was the hardest part of doing that for you, or just take it away the way you want to, you feel like answering that.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me being a new designer and stuff was a lot of self-doubt and being self-conscious about finally putting yourself out there, like publishing this pattern, because I think a common worry is, you know, I don't want to look stupid, or I don't want to accidentally copy anyone else's design and stuff. That was always something that held me back from publishing patterns. And I think once you take that like final leap and stuff, um, getting over the self-doubt and everything, that is probably the hardest part of designing. But also what helps, I think, with all of that is the importance of a tech editor. A tech editor, working with a good tech editor really helps you also get over those fears, because you have someone double checking your work. And that I just think that is so important, to work with a tech editor, and that really helps calm those fears that you have as well. But yeah, I'm curious to hear from the more experienced designers about this, because I only have one published pattern. So yeah, but that was the hardest part for me.
But the importance of a tech editor is a very, very good point. Thank you for making it. So Angie, did you have something that you found hardest in the process so far?
Yes, I think answering that exact question about the hardest pattern, I've had 4 self-published, but one I went for. Sorry, one of them was for a magazine. So the challenge for me was, it was a whole new ball game. I was working as a newish designer, also meeting the challenges of a deadline, and I'm not. I'm a bit of a last minute. There's a deadline and it gets me going, but sometimes that can cause stress, and you don't realize until you get to those points how big the challenge is. And yeah, so there was a lot of stress in that. But I think the part I also discovered on that pattern for the first time is, because we were given a theme to work with, that was really easy to match, because it was something about gardening, or gardening like our gardens or something. And I'm not originally from Australia, but there's a plant here called the kangaroo paw, and it's just spectacular. And it actually looks like the paw of a kangaroo. And so I was like, I can't not use this. But now you're trying to find a stitch pattern to illustrate that. And I've drawn it, but then trying to actually make that work in, you know, with stitches. So you're trying to manipulate stitches to get a reality that's in your mind. But then it's also got to work with the yarn. So I had a yarnie that dyed up. I really liked her yarn, and I asked if I could use her yarn. And working with that, it just wasn't working with the pattern. So then I had to ask if she could just tweak it a bit, and we had to try a different weight yarn. So yeah, there was a lot of learning curves in that process for me, and just trying to get, you've got something in mind, you've got a deadline, and trying to get it working. Yeah, it was challenging, and at the time quite stressful, but I still enjoyed it and I learned a lot. So I feel like I've learned a few things from that for next time.
That's fantastic. Yeah, learning experiences are precious. You know, they're really important. As you get started, they really help with moving forward. How about you, Kathleen? Any of your patterns that was harder than the other ones to design?
I had a really hard time deciding. Actually, I've been through my sort of portfolio and going, was that hard? Was that harder than that one? Was that definitely? I would say one of the hardest was the traditional fisherman's gansey that I did for Knitty. Because not only it's a fisherman's gansey, so it has to be very mathematically precise with, you know, like armhole gussets and saddle stitches down the or saddle shoulders, and it has to be exactly mathematical. And there was also like totally different charting for each of the armhole gussets because they were patterned, and the different sizes needed different charts, and there also needed to be different combinations of the motifs on every single size, right? Because it looks totally different across the front size to size, because I had to work out how to do a combination to make it the widths that I wanted. But I think probably, and I actually found my original prototype was the tracery vest was the hardest, which is the one that looks like a stained glass window. So this was really hard because I came up with the design, and the design came out of like, what am I going to do with this variegated yarn? How am I going to make it look nice? Because I don't generally like variegated yarns. So I figured this out, and I'm like, ooh, this really works. And then I made my prototype, and I just sat on it for at least a year. And then again in 2012, this was when, you know, like a design call came out, and I'm like, this would be perfect, but I don't know if I am good enough, experienced enough, knowledgeable enough, capable enough to execute it within the deadline, because it was a magazine. It had a deadline. I cannot remember whether that was the pattern where the yarn took its sweet time to get to me. So I had even less time. I can't remember. But also, you know, this was the first time really that I needed to grade multiple adult sizes of something, which included boobs. And so, you know, like that is something I'd never done that before. I had to figure out like, how am I, you know, where's the neckline going to start and stop on the different sizes? How much are you going to knit before you do the armhole shaping? How much do you have to decrease between the outside and the, you know, where the shoulders finally end? And, you know, it's stranded, and I had to do some really precise swatching and blocking of the swatch. And I was just really worried that when I finally got it all done and I blocked it, it would be completely wrong and look terrible. And it didn't, but like it was hardest in my head, really. And just trying to get there. And obviously it was a fantastic experience because it gave me all of this knowledge and experience with grading an adult pattern. And so that was extremely valuable, but it was rough getting there, mostly because of me being inside my head and being worried that I couldn't. And then it turned out that I could. And so then I guess the rest of my designing work has just been setting about to prove that that wasn't a fluke. But yeah, that was what made it hard, really.
Always up for a good challenge. Yep, that's Kathleen. but really grading your first adult garment with such an intricate color work motif, that is
rough.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
It was not without stress, I assure you.
And Michelle, any of your designs that qualifies as hardest for you? And
Yeah, I had to think about that one. And Kathleen, yes, that was a good one for you with that. I appreciate that work. I do. And your head, you're right. Whatever you think about it is like there is a way. I can envision it being finished. Somehow between here and the end, I have to fill in the rest. It works, but yeah, the one for me that probably is my hardest one. It's quite well loved. It's the North Sea hoodie that I did for Ancient Arts Yarn, Ancient Arts in Calgary. Um,
it's gorgeous.
yeah, it is. It is. It's pretty much what I would say one of my masterpieces, actually, because I really loved it myself. They sent me their samples of their new yarn, Hurley. I'm going to say it wrong, when it was being developed to see if I liked it. I was having little conversations with them. I had done some other design before, a couple designs before, so it was successful. They said they were going to be looking for Viking theme designs, and they wanted something that could be tying in the theme like that. And they didn't know what, they didn't care what. They just wanted me to send some ideas. Tell me what you can make with this, and do some sketches. And so I went a little overboard with my proposal, and they loved it, of course. And so this sweater has an original cable panel that's mirrored, and it was inspired by the etching on the swords. I looked like source materials, so I drew that all up myself and kept on knitting swatches and swatches to get the cables that I like. So yeah, I developed the cables, and then I made it unisex, but with 9 sizes. So even just doing 9 sizes is enough, but when it's unisex, it has to fit the same and different at the same time. So I did a yoke shoulders, because it's easier, softer for both men and women's shoulders. Okay, so I got that in there, but I wanted it top down, and so I started it with the hood. So that was a little bit different, getting all the stitches to mathematically work out on the yoke. And I didn't want them to pool. I didn't want all the increases to pool. So I wanted it to be random, but spread. So I couldn't just say in the pattern, spread increases evenly. That's not cool. People don't want that. So I actually wrote it out everywhere to do the increases for the yoke, so that they wouldn't be all bunched up on one side or all in the middle or something. So that was just crazy. And then I did this big triangle pocket in the middle. So I'd worked out that cable design too. So when I sent them the sketch, it didn't really portray all the difficult traps that I had put in there for myself. They just said, great, okay. So they said, how much yarn do you need? And I said, tons, because I was going to have to do a lot of swatching, even more swatching. So they sent me a lot. It's a big task, I'll tell you that one. And oh yeah, and the other part to that one was too, is they always have their charts charted and written. So I had to fiddle with that technology on the computer, which I was not comfortable with. And because my pattern was also written in the round and straight knitting, I had to do both. So it was double even for that. And the editor was so overwhelmed, I'm going to say, but did well. And it took me over a year to get from the swatches and the sketches to being when it was actually published. And I think they were going to put it in a collection, but they just decided to let it stand on its own and fill in the gaps before the rest of the collection was ready. And it was one of those things where they just gave me free reign, and I really made a problem for myself. But I worked it all out. And I really think it's a great design, and it really did do the job for the yarn. So there, that was it.
And
That was my
you are
hardest
right.
and my
It
best.
is a great design, and
Yeah.
it really paid off in the end.
Yeah.
The comments in the
A
chat,
lot of
that is an
pages. Oh my
incredible
God.
hoodie. It's stunning. So
It's
yeah,
very hand-holdy. So I think even if you're near beginner, like maybe your first sweater with cables, like you've done something, I think you could handle it, because it really is written step by step, row by row. You just follow the pattern and check off what you've done and merrily on your next step. So
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Next question, we'll go with how do you keep up your motivation during testing and or writing stage? Maybe Angie, did you?
Yes. So I think through the testing stage, what keeps up my motivation is I find it hard once you put all that work into writing the pattern. I mean, I love the initial stages. I love creating that item, but I think I've heard this from multiple designers. Actually, writing it down is, you're taking it from something you love and that's tactile, and you've got to do all the math and you've got to do all the right things to make it a really great pattern. So that's a challenge in itself. So taking it to the next stage of getting it tested, what keeps me motivated is I try to remember that without that testing process, I'm not going to have as great a pattern that people will enjoy. So I've had great patterns I've worked with, and I've had patterns that are so frustrating. You feel like you're not even a designer and you're trying to redo some of the pattern, and I just want people to really feel comfortable, and I want them to have fun. So, if it's going to be complicated or there's going to be frustrations in the pattern, it's going to make it more of a chore. And what was the other part of the question? The writing stage.
The writing part.
Writing. I'm really interested in listening to how the other designers go. When I saw this question, I'm like, yes, this is a question I want the answer to. So, yeah, I can get through the testing stage, but I think the hardest part for me is I like that refinement at the end, even though it's hard, and I like that initial process. But yeah, getting it onto the written page, that part, I'd love to hear how the others get motivated.
All right, so we'll hear from Kathleen then.
Okay. So for me, under normal circumstances, the motivation is the raging drive to share the idea with the world. Like I get a real, it's like a contact high, right? You publish the pattern and then people react. And that to me is like, that's an incredible motivator. And so that gets me through all the sort of the not so interesting stuff. I don't mind pattern writing. I am extremely geeky. It's very much like writing code, which is something else that I do. And so it's really, normally it's not that hard to get it done, because it's just something I have to get out of the way before I can get to that contact high of sharing it with the world. But if you actually take a really good look at my portfolio, you will notice that I have not released anything in over 2 years. And so the answer right now is I don't actually keep up my motivation, because it's not like I haven't been designing things. I've got a few things that are just like, I'm ready to plug the photography and the instructions and everything into my template and go and sort of get to that sort of like test knitter stage and the tech editor stage, but I haven't. And I think it's been really rough. I think I've probably got some sort of low key depression, which is a result of sort of post pandemic and political upheaval. And the other thing, earlier this year, we discovered in our house we have moths, and it's just like, it's really hard to get excited about your knitting when you've got all that going on in your head. So, and of course, like throughout the fall and winter, I am very busy with the Fasten Off. So that also takes time away. So it's like, the motivation actually has been pretty hard to come by of recent years, but I am hoping that I get it back and that I can share more things with the world. That would be nice.
Well, the knitting world is sure hoping that you will find that motivation back, because I know that I, for one, am really looking forward to what's coming next from you, for sure. So, Michelle, what would you have to share about that? How do you keep up your motivation during testing, writing? Oh, I'll ask you to unmute. Yeah, all right.
I am okay. Yeah, I don't feel motivated a lot to do the writing either. I like to just sit and knit. I like to do the sketching and figuring out the designs, and writing in the notebook, that pattern, how it would be okay. And I really don't like typing. I don't like typing at all. That's the worst part of the whole job. If I could just submit my design in pencil, I would be so happy. I didn't grow up with computers and I didn't learn to type. So I don't type properly and it takes me forever. So, but because I'm so slow, there's less typos. And my editors do say that they don't find much to correct. So there's that, but no,
And
I'll put
how
off
do you,
typing.
yeah, how do you enjoy the testing part, the testing process? You know, it's the time when you get feedback from knitters.
I don't get that much,
No?
honestly. I use test knitters as much as I can, and when I actually do it for a design that's been hired to do, they provide the test knitters, and I only have a couple of questions, so I really don't know what the heck's going on with them. When I'm doing the test knitters, and I really don't get a lot of feedback either. I have had 3 or 4 that have during the project like repeatedly asked me questions like all along, which is great. That's what I'm looking for. But other ones, it's like at the end, it's like, did you finish? And they said, yeah. I was like, oh, you didn't have any questions? No, it's fine. But that doesn't really help me. So I'm not that happy with the test knitting idea exactly. I wish there was more. I don't want to pester people, so I don't, I'm not on them. I just let you come with questions.
Well, maybe it's a function of you having so much experience that your patterns are clear from the start. And
You don't know though. You don't have feedback, you don't know.
you never know. That's right. So we'll go to Liv, and I can imagine that motivation is a really tricky question for someone with ADHD sometimes. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I also am someone who has to feel the pressure of a deadline. So how I keep up the motivation is I set deadlines for myself. And a trick that I have found is you have to tell other people about the deadlines. So then you force yourself to stick to them and you can't because if it's just like an internal deadline, you're like, oh, I can push this back. Stuff like, no, people are expecting something from this date. So you feel that pressure of the deadline. So that's the biggest key with me is setting my own deadlines and then telling other people about that, whether it be like test knitters or just like the people in the neuro stitches community and stuff like that. And then in terms of testing or motivation during like the testing stage, I found that it's kind of hard to find testers for your patterns. It's which is kind of funny because I'm always down to test patterns for other people. I absolutely love doing that because I love providing feedback and helping someone else out with their pattern, like make it more clear for someone else, especially someone else who might be neurodivergent
Right.
because I'm a very visual learner. And so sometimes I won't understand something where if it's just written. So pictures and videos are very important for me. But yeah, the testing, I love testing patterns, but I found it a little bit difficult to find testers. So yeah, that's something I'm working on still.
And are you maybe trying to create a testing pool in your NeuroStitches community?
Yeah, I have people in the community who do tests for me. But also wanting to expand that to people who aren't
Outside
neurodivergent
the
too.
community.
Yeah.
Right.
Of in terms of making my patterns more accessible to everyone. But yeah, that is helpful though. Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So next question we had is, do you try to find your niche versus just designing what you want to make? Maybe we can keep going with Liv about that one. As a new designer, are you trying to niche down, or is it just you're going with the flow of your inspiration?
Yeah, so this is a great question because I find myself going back and forth between the two because on one hand, I with autism ADHD, I have it's like always an internal conflict of I like routines and my, you know, same type of niche, like, but I also have like, the dopamine chasing of I have this really great idea, I need to get it out, get it down, and this is new and exciting. I'm using all these beautiful, unique colors and stuff like that. But right now, I think I am going to design what I want. So like when the inspiration strikes, continuing to go with that. Um, for right now though, I am working on a collection of patterns that use the crochet waistcoat stitch that makes it look like knitting. Um, so I am gonna my first published pattern is what uses that. And I am gonna continue with that theme. I'm designing a cowl right now that uses the waistcoat stitch and stuff. So I am doing both, I guess. So for right now, I'm continuing on with this niche of knit look crochet, but I plan on in the future also, you know, releasing designs that I really love in the moment.
Sounds good. How about you, Angie? What are your plans for your designing career?
Yeah, this was a very good question. Also, I agree with Liv, and it's quite hard to decide. I think when you in the early days, I think naturally when you go with what you like, then I think your own aesthetic does develop. And I remember at the beginning wondering, at what point do you follow what's trending, or at what point do you follow what's trending? Do you go with colors that are in fashion? Do you go with what I like to wear, or are you trying to find a certain audience? And I think I came to the conclusion that if I design what I love and I stay true to what makes me feel inspired and happy, and even, I mean, I could diverge a little bit with colors, I suppose, because, we are influenced by what the yarn dyes are producing, and, that's exciting and fun, and I think I need that variety. But I think if I stay true to what inspires me, I will attract the kind of knitters that like knitting that I'm making. But I think if I try to do something I don't know, I think I need to find my niche. I think that's the question. I need to find what my niche is, and then I will maybe have my niche. But I think for now, I'm just settling down with what I feel happy making and wearing myself. And I think, what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, I get distracted easily. So I think if in its own way, I'm going to have a bit of variety in there anyway, because yeah, I can, something will get boring and then I'll try something new. So I think that'll happen anyway in my design.
Thanks. And Michelle, since you have such a long career behind you, did you try to niche down? How did you go about that?
Yeah, for my fondle patterns collection, the yarns that I have chosen myself, that I knit for myself, and I've given the name fondle patterns to, those ones are the ones that I've totally designed for the things that I want and the things I want to wear, and it's for myself. If it's for another client, I don't put fondle patterns on it. So that's the ones that I have put in my, whatever it is, the pay hip store, pretty much were just the fondle patterns ones and the ones that I liked the best. There's a bunch others that I will add, but those were the ones that I thought were crucial. So these are things that I made for myself to enjoy because I wanted to make it with the yarns that I had. And if I think it's worth being a pattern that others might like, then I will write it up properly. That's how it gets to be in that collection. And plenty of my designs are duds. There's a lot that they're well liked, but no one actually buys the pattern and makes it. So there's a lot like that actually, and it's okay because I enjoyed making it, and I thought someone else might. Maybe they will later. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm ahead of my time. It's not. I don't follow fashion like that. I mean, I try to dress that way, but it's not what I'm knitting. Sometimes I design something that I think everyone else has seen before, or maybe they already have a pattern for, so it's not really that original. But I think that maybe they would like to see how I have done it, what the way that I have made it with certain kinds of yarn. Sometimes I make those ones for free. So I just design them to be free, like some basic mitten patterns and hat patterns and that sort of thing. I just feel like I don't feel right charging somebody when it's almost just a bunch of numbers and this is how you do it. So there's a lot of patterns like that. So they are not on my PayHip either. There's a whole section of free ones on Ravelry. So I do what I want. The funnel pattern ones, absolutely. And the other ones that are not labeled that are for clients trying to fill in what they're wanting. And I don't accept those ones that often. So that's it.
Interesting. Kathleen, do you have something, did you try to niche? Because you do have some clear trends in your portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. I design what I want. That's the rule. Now, what ends up happening, as you've said, is that a lot of patterns that are I design what I want end up being, me being me, they tend to be intricate color work. That's often what comes out of my head, but not always. Like I will do cables, I will do lace, I will do things that are very plain, but the thing is in the shaping. But it is true that what ends up happening a lot of the time is intricate color work, but it's not something I'm doing on purpose. It's just the way my brain usually works. But yeah, and I do worry sometimes about like, oh, do I have a recognizable brand? Do I not? And then I realize that I don't care, because if I'm not like if I'm inspired to create something, then it should come out of my head and be shared. And so that's the way I see it. I don't worry about it usually. Maybe like at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, I have no brand, but like most of the time I'm like, I don't care what you think. I'm designing what I want. That's how it works for me.
Awesome. So we have about 6 minutes left. I have one last quick question. If anyone in the audience has any question, get them ready. And just to close off before that, I'm gonna ask you, maybe starting with Michelle, what are we going to see from you next? What are the plans?
I do have a pattern in testing right now, if anyone would like to. And if you give me feedback, it's even better. A very useful cardigan. I think I put it in the testing category there. So it's just a really basic cardigan, bottom up, but no sewing. Raglan sleeves done in a sock yarn or a fingering weight yarn. Whole lot of buttons. Pockets are optional. This size is 2XL, and that one is the extra small. So I've got 2 full samples there. This is one of my prototypes that I did just for myself. So that was pre-typed pattern, and then that one, and then that one. So now I'm ready for other people to give it a try.
Nice. I really like the color blocking on the gray one. That's
to use up your yarns that you might not have very many of. Okay, I'll cut it short. Somebody else can go next.
Yep. So how about you, Angie? What is coming next from you?
So this is my headband that I've done with the same stitch pattern that I've done with the cowl. So I just thought, that's a really quick, I like to make quick, at the moment, quick fun project. Yeah. So that's probably next. And then I've got the same, I just wanted to, because I'm still learning, I wanted to focus on getting new, experiencing shaping and working on different finished project, but having the stitch pattern work through it. And then I've got a few shawl ideas I've got coming. But yeah, for that stitch pattern I've worked for, those are the next two in line.
Very interesting, and thank you for the preview. That's so sweet. Liv, any next design that are ready to talk about?
Yeah, I am, so my thanks, it's crochet hat, pattern uses the waistcoat stitch, which, makes a very, it's like, it looks very much like knitting. Like a lot of people, when they see my hat, I don't have it handy right now, but, they look at it and they're like, oh, this is knitted. I'm like, nope, it's actually crochet. And so I've got a cowl designed. I've got it in a draft form on my computer, but yeah, I'm hoping to get that released in January. So yeah.
Sounds great.
So I'm sticking with the theme of that, but I'm not going to stick with knit looking crochet patterns only. That's just what I really like right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Of course, you don't have to do that forever, but I think having a set is a very good idea.
Yeah.
That sounds great. And Kathleen, you had some designs ready, waiting for you to write them up.
If I ever get off my hiney again and actually put this stuff together, some of the things that I've got waiting in the wings are, I've got a very traditional Fair Isle tam, which I made as a 90th birthday present a couple of years ago for a family friend. And I've got a garter stitch mosaic Ruana, which I really, really love, that I would love to get out there. I've also got, oh yes, a really fancy baby blanket made from a bunch of stranded knitting octagons with lace squares to fill in the middle between the octagon shape. Octagons or hexagons? Octagons. And I also designed last year for one of my employees who's having a baby. It's a hexagonal baby blanket, and it's inspired by the red tortoise cakes that are traditionally served in Chinese culture at the first moon party for a baby, because she's from Singapore. And it's like, it's really cool because it's got a hexagon in the middle and then a bunch of trapezoids to make the bigger hexagon around it. And the way it works is, as you're knitting the trapezoid, you're also joining it to the middle hexagon. And then once all the trapezoids are done, there are saddles to join the trapezoids together. And anyway, it's like really cool, and I really want to share it, but I don't know when it's coming out. Those are the things off the top of my head that will be coming next, if I can, settle down and get the motivation going. But I don't know when it's going to be. But
They'll come when they come. And I'm sure we'll all be super happy to see them at that point. Yeah. So we have one quick question from the audience. That is, what was the most unexpected thing you learned from designing? Any one of you want to take that one? I see designers thinking.
Deadlines are really hard. Deadlines are really hard, and they make you really stressed, and you should try to pretend you can't do it by that time and always give yourself extra right from the beginning.
That's a good, yeah, I like that advice.
I have one.
Yes,
and this is something that I learned it very, very fast, which is, there's not a lot of money in this. It was surprising because I was like, well, let's see, like if I make, 10 patterns and they're $5 each and I sell 10 a day, then I can, like this is my side hustle, and I don't have to be like as motivated at work, and I will always have somewhere where the mortgage is coming from. And that's not how it works. That's not the volume that knitters and crochet designers get. So that's in the nature of being a nasty surprise. I'm sure there are very delightful surprises, but that was the first one that is a genuine surprise that popped to mind, was, discovering that. Yeah.
Thank you. Angie, I saw you had raised your hand. Did you have anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think I thought I could do designing. You can as a knitter, you think, okay, I'm sure I can do this, you know, but I think what surprised me was just you're knitting in your own home. You don't get to necessarily see the bigger world out there of knitters, and just what surprised me was how welcoming and how lovely the community was. I mean, I already knew they were lovely, but as a designer, it is scary putting yourself out there, and there's so many that you love, and you're just not sure, you know, is there going to be an audience for my pattern or for something I like? And sure enough, just the encouragement and the just being received, I think, was a surprise for me. That was really delightful, and I ended up going, oh, I actually did that. I went from concept all the way through testing, tech editing, and then release, and then all the promoting and that. And you think, yeah, I did it. And I mean, doing it over and over, that's where you've got to get that energy. But it was a nice surprise to see that, yes, I actually could do something that I really wanted to do, and it worked.
Awesome. That sounds wonderful. Liv, any quick one you'd like to share?
Just that grading is the worst. Like, it's the absolute worst. I came up with a hat to fit my head, and then having to like go back and figure out the grading for different sizes. I think Michelle was the one who said that she grades as she goes. That is mind blowing to me. I so wish I could do that. But it's like I have to get this out of my head first in the one size, and then I can go back and figure out the others later. But I love that. That's amazing that she can do that. So yeah, grading is terrible. That was a surprise for me because I didn't think it would be that complicated. But because I was like, oh, it's just numbers. Like it's a numbers thing. I was like, no.
Well, thank you for sharing. So we went a little bit over. So I want to thank everyone for showing up, coming out, and especially our designers, Michelle, Liv, Kathleen, and Angie. We hope you enjoyed today's designer video panel, and please do check out our Fasten Off Yarnalong schedule for more events and activities, because it's not over. So thank you very, very much. And I hope I'll see you again for the next panel or on Discord, anywhere you get. So, thanks, everyone. Bye.